millions of dollars a week just to do the encoding. And then that content delivery piece, depending on your audience, actually ends up typically costing 3 or 4 times that amount just to deliver the video all around the world. Depends on your use case, how many viewers you have. But you know, you can see how those costs are prohibitive for startups to spin something up, find something successful, but also cover their infrastructure costs before they have a sustainable business model, before they have funding. So we can dive into all that, but hopefully that's a good high-level overview.
Yeah, no, that was a very useful primer for what we're going to get into next, which is the entrance of Livepeer and how Livepeer kind of changes that. So again, at a very high level, we can talk about the technical aspects of Livepeer as well, but at a high level, what does Livepeer then do, and how are you kind of changing this economic structure to make it more viable for people to live stream?
Yeah, so I think Livepeer, our mission is to build the world's open video infrastructure. At the surface, what we do is we have this decentralized network that handles all of the video encoding and can reduce the cost significantly. We'll talk about how. And through the use of open technology, we can also introduce peer-to-peer protocols for content delivery to reduce those CDN bills. So you have this view of the world, how video streaming works today, and typically the economics are, you pay $3 an hour to one of these service providers, or you license some expensive software for over $100 a month per server to do your encoding, and then you pay by the gigabyte for the content delivery network. Using open source software, you can access software for free that can do the encoding, and you can outsource kind of the heavy lifting of doing the video transcoding into all the formats to Livepeer's kind of peer-to-peer network, kind of bubble 2 there. It's just a graph diagram, but that is a peer-to-peer network of operators on the Livepeer network doing the encoding. And then, as things exist today in the world, you still probably want to use a CDN to ensure kind of reliable, fast starts of video for anyone joining. But what you want to do is you want to also offload as much of the bandwidth as possible from the CDN into the peer-to-peer network of viewers who are watching a video, so they can actually share their bandwidth and serve content to other viewers directly instead of paying the CDN to deliver that content. And as it exists today, this peer-to-peer transcoding network has been functional for years. It works, it powers millions of minutes of video a week across a series of applications. We can take a look at some of them. The content delivery technology is something kind of in R&D, proof of concept. There's working centralized solutions that already do this and show it's possible, but they don't have open software. You kind of pay to license and access that by the gigabyte, and an open network can actually really disrupt that. So how is this enabled? Like, how can it be cheaper? How can this be coordinated? And we can talk about how the power of blockchain and crypto economic incentives actually enable this, and we can talk about what sort of cost disruption you can enable and where that comes from.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great direction to take it in. And just before we get there, so I understand it and to make it kind of clear. So you're saying that in this kind of model, prior to this, I would send my video over to some server owned by Amazon or what have you to transcode it. Whereas here, if I have this correct, I'm going to break up that video to a bunch of people who are running Livepeer software on their local machines, and they will in turn transcode a bit of it. And instead of me paying them dollars, I would pay them some token, and then that would then go move to the CDN, correct?
Yep, that's exactly right. Anyone who has extra compute capacity can join the Livepeer network. They can earn money for encoding video, and then you as a user can use the Livepeer network to handle this video encoding and payment settled in cryptocurrency, accessible to anyone in the world.
Got it. So with that, let's kind of take let's talk a little bit more about the actual crypto aspect of this. And so I know this is on Ethereum, right? And so if you can speak a little bit about how you decided what chain to put this on, and how you decided to kind of design your tokenomics to facilitate all of these kind of payments, and how you kind of thought about that whole process.
Yeah. So take a step back. Why are we using a blockchain? How does a blockchain enable this to exist, right? And I think you even want to take a step back further and say, why is it so expensive today? It's because if you're trying to do live video at scale, you need a large amount of servers. It's very computationally heavy to do this encoding. Like one server can encode like 2 videos before it kind of reaches its capacity. And so if you're letting hundreds, thousands of people live stream, you have no choice but to pre-provision hundreds or thousands of servers in order to be standing by for your peak capacity to encode these videos. And as a result, there's very few games in town where you have the ability to quickly spin up and provision thousands of servers. You end up with Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft Azure, right? Platforms which are great for startups to bootstrap small ideas and prove proofs of, validate their business, unlock tons of value there. But when you're scaling something, it's very expensive. They charge 4x more than what you would pay for bare metal to be able to deploy something yourself. But they're kind of the only scalable cloud platforms in town, right? So if you were trying to compete with them, what would you do? You'd have to put 20 different data centers all around the world and deploy thousands of servers, and that's just not going to be a valid starting point for another cloud provider or for you as a video developer. So what does the blockchain let you do? You say, well, there actually exists plenty of idle compute capacity all around the world already that could be available to encode video. And by the way, video benefits if someone nearby you is doing the encoding because it's lower latency, it's a better network connection to them. So wouldn't it be great if you could tap into all of this idle capacity? But how do you coordinate all of those idle servers? How do you settle payments to them? How do you ensure that they're trustworthy and they're actually going to do the work with high performance and provide a high quality of service, right? And you could create a kind of centralized company that everyone trusts to do that vetting and settle the payments and whatnot. But blockchain and kind of these crypto protocols as enabled by smart contracts give you a superpower and a jumpstart that helps bootstrap this capacity. There's a couple elements there. One is, I don't know if you guys have heard this term of protocol, but protocols encoded into smart contracts essentially define kind of the rules of the game in code that everyone is playing by. And so what you can do is you can write a protocol that says, hey, anyone that advertises their availability on this network and goes to cash in payments that prove they did the work correctly will get the payments settled in crypto, and you don't need a company, you don't need to trust a company in order to authorize you or hook up your bank account to or be in the right jurisdiction in order to participate. You can just connect your server to this blockchain, and as long as you're playing by the rules of the code, you're on a level playing field with everyone else. So instantly, you deploy a protocol, the Livepeer protocol, that creates these incentives, and you mentioned why Ethereum. Ethereum was the only smart contract platform in town in 2016, right? It was, and it still is the most secure, most decentralized, highest value at stake smart contract platform. So it's a great open development platform that lets you deploy a protocol that everyone trusts. That's one. But then the second aspect of what kind of blockchains give you, I think, is even more powerful, and that's the ability to create token incentives in these networks, to embed crypto economic incentives is what people call these. And the easiest way of looking at this is saying, hey, this Livepeer network is going to be owned by everyone who participates in it, everyone who runs hardware on it, everyone who participates in the roles of the network to make this thing work. The way that ownership is going to be represented is by the Livepeer token, and you're going to earn this token by showing up and putting supply on the network kind of in these early days, being ready and willing and proving that you do work correctly on this network to help the network. And so because of that incentive, and because people believe in the mission and the vision, they believe that they're an owner in it, and they can verify that because that's what the code and the smart contracts and the blockchain says, and no one can change it. You get this whole worldwide army of people that show up and put their servers on this network, even before there's a lot of demand, even before there's a lot of video or money to be made for people paying fees to use the network, they're doing it kind of in a speculative fashion to become owners in this network and believe it will be, useful and valuable in the future. And so that's like, for an entrepreneur, that's amazing. That's how you solve the chicken and the egg problem in a marketplace. You get all the supply to show up before you even have demand to feed them. And then because you have that supply, now it's really powerful. Now you can have a cost-effective network, and I would like to hit on why it's cost-effective and how that's enabled as well.
So what are the costs? You talked about in the old world, it's paying like $3 an hour to stream, and so in this new supply and demand kind of dynamic world, what do those costs actually look like, and what are the kind of earnings that the orchestrators, which are the miners in this case, get? And then there's also a delegation component as well, so we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that $3 an hour for a cloud service for encoding is a great starting point. So who are the suppliers on our network? They're people who actually have GPUs that can encode video, and what they actually are is they're actually GPU operators who are mining cryptocurrency. So this is a technical slide here that shows a GPU in this diagram. And what these miners are doing, they're mining cryptocurrencies like Ethereum or Zcash or Monero or Grid. They have tens of thousands or millions of these GPUs spread in data centers all around the world. And these CUDA cores down at the bottom, those are general purpose compute units. Those are hashing crypto 24/7, right? And they're making a couple dollars a day mining crypto. But these GPUs happen to have these video encoding and decoding ASICs on them called NVDEX and NVEX that can't hash crypto. All they can do is encode video. And it just so happens that in these miners, they're sitting there doing absolutely nothing, right? So Livepeer's software says, you can actually make additional revenue for encoding video without disrupting your crypto mining. So for you, it's additional revenue at no opportunity cost. That's really powerful. That's something that everyone says yes to, as long as the user experience is good enough and secure enough, which still, by the way, there's progress to do. It's still a little challenging to set this up correctly. But what's the economic impact here? So I mentioned that to encode 1 HD video is $3 an hour on a cloud service. These cards can usually do 2 at a time, so let's say it's 2. It's $6 an hour. That's what's that? $144 a day to encode 2 HD videos on a cloud service. Well, the cost for these miners to encode 2 HD videos is about 76 cents per day in electricity and bandwidth. And so you can see a huge difference between, hey, their cost is 76 cents a day. Cloud providers are charging $144 a day. This is an open marketplace where anyone with these GPUs says, hey, here's a price I'm willing to charge to encode your video. You have competition to get that additional revenue. They already have millions of these things deployed and paid off in working business models. They're used to trying to squeeze out an extra couple cents a day on these cards. You can see how there's plenty of room for them to make a profit above that 76 cents, but disrupt the $144 that cloud providers are charging. And so you get this potential to be, 50, 100x more cost disruptive. What we're seeing kind of the early days of the network is we're seeing like a 10x cost disruption once you bundle all the other kind of services you need to build on top. But I think that's pretty compelling and makes a real difference.
I see. And so right now you have not only people contributing supply as miners, but you also have people purchasing tokens to then stake and delegate on miners. So can you elaborate about what incentivizes somebody to do that? Why is that kind of critical to the security of the overall Livepeer network itself?
Definitely. So one of the roles the Livepeer token plays, the primary role it plays, it's called a work token. If you want to be one of these video miners, you get Livepeer token and you stake it. That means you kind of lock it in the protocol as a security deposit. And the notion is, you're going to be encoding someone's video. If you maliciously misencode it and attack the network and send back blank video or something worse, then your deposit can be taken away from you. You lose it. So the amount of tokens you stake is sort of the security that you're providing as a worker. And the more that you stake, presumably the more streams you can encode, the higher value streams you could encode, the more people would trust you. And so you could think of it as, staking one token entitles you to compete to perform one unit of work on the network. The more security you put down, the more units of work you can perform, the more fees you can earn, because people pay you in Ether in order to encode their videos. And so, these node operators get token and stake token. But you mentioned you can also, if you don't want to run hardware, how do you participate in this network? Well, you can get token and you can stake it on behalf of one of these video miners. You're essentially providing security, and you're trusting that they're going to do the work well based on their reputation, what they're campaigning around, their history of work. You're providing more security, so they can now perform more work, they can earn more fees. What do you get for it? Well, they're willing to share some of their fees with you. So if you get Livepeer token, you stake it towards them, you'll earn a portion of the fees that they advertise what percent they're willing to share, what commission they'll give you. You'll earn some of those fees in ETH. But I mentioned, the protocol is continuously distributing tokens. It's distributing ownership to everyone who's showing up in these early days to run the network. Anyone who stakes is also earning new Livepeer token rewards every day. And so that's kind of a further incentive. It's like earning interest in the network and growing your ownership in the network for putting down kind of these security deposits and helping secure the network in the early days. And that's really powerful. That's the incentive. It's the distribution of this ownership. It's new tokens being generated every day that gets thousands of people to show up and participate. And then what happens when you have this kind of supply available? You actually see, you just cut to this here. You see this kind of flywheel effect where you kind of have this low price for streaming because of the economics we talked about before. That increases the volume of demand to use this network. That brings more dollars and more fees flowing in. Because there's more dollars flowing in, you see more competition amongst the node operators and token holders to earn those fees. You see them running better hardware, better monitoring, better setups, becoming efficient, charging, and that competition leads to lower prices, which then feeds the flywheel again, which means more broadcasters would come back to try and use this network instead of alternatives. So that's really, really powerful. So what has it led to? It's kind of led to a lot of growth in the network over the last year. As we hope, this is how many minutes of video are streamed per week. And you see kind of back at the beginning of the year, it was a couple 100,000 minutes per week of video. It grew, we hit the 1 million minute milestone, maybe in, July or so, we passed the 2 million minute milestone later in the year, and we've been between 2 to 3 million minutes since. So good growth that this flywheel is working. Plenty of product challenges to make it easy enough to accelerate this growth, but that's kind of a good start. You'll see the fees rising, and those are the fees earned by the node operators. So that's a good balance to, I mentioned in the early days, you're earning ownership in the network through Livepeer token. You say, well, that's great, but that can't go on forever. There needs to be kind of real value coming in for usage of this network. And what you see is kind of that Livepeer token percentage of the rewards going down, and the fees that node operators are earning going up. And over the long period of time, you want to see it to be the majority as fees.
Interesting. And so of the kind of current usage that you're seeing on this network, would you categorize many of the products that are using Livepeer to facilitate their transcoding and streaming as being kind of Web3 native live streaming products? Or is it more general into like any type of video streaming product? Like who's really using the Livepeer network right now?
Yeah, good question. So I think when we started 5 years ago, we said, oh, there's this new world of dApps, decentralized applications. Web3 native applications are going to come on, and decentralized social media, and decentralized media, and broadcast. And it was way too early for that, right? We started going to Web3 hackathons, but no one was building social media apps. They were building kind of the early primitives of a new financial system and DeFi and these sorts of things. But we always value practicality. I mean, this is a video streaming use case. It's a $70 billion market, and it's 80% of the traffic on the internet. and we make a real, disruption in infrastructure in that space. So we kind of started going to market with more traditional kind of Web2 streaming companies, and what we've seen is a lot of user-generated content applications, things that look like Twitch, like Livepeer, because they're letting hundreds or thousands of users stream for free, and that is expensive, and they need to kind of monetize on the back end on the popular streams. And so, so you have some of the users here are, Play DJ TV is a DJ streaming application. Kurkuma is a social shopping. TV is kind of a Twitch-like game streaming company. Picardo is an artist streaming community. You can think of these all as like verticals of Twitch that create their own communities and enable features for those communities that maybe don't exist on a general purpose platform. Could maybe take a look at one if we, I think here's playdj.tv. Mentioned it's a platform for DJ streaming. They launched and had a really successful launch, got thousands of DJs to sign up, and it bankrupted the founders in like 2 weeks. They were like, oh, we just ran out of money because our infrastructure cost was so high. And so what they did is they found Livepeer with kind of disruptive economics. They were able to relaunch. They were able to put kind of a subscription model on top that works for them, and they can exist and power the DJ community as a result. So, here's just one streamer who's doing, I don't know, it looks like he's playing a real music video, but you have others kind of streaming from their bedrooms. It's your typical UGC type platform, right? And so, you go to Picardo, you can see 300 streams right now from artists who are drawing requests from their users and anime figures and these sorts of things. And, these community-driven experiences are really cool. Exit out of there real quick. Cool, there's one in here, Glass.xyz, I think you mentioned they may have come for an event here.
Yeah.
This is one of the first where we are starting to see now, we're in 2022, we are seeing Web3 native media applications begin to become viable. A lot of this is driven by the kind of NFT boom, which created better ways for creators to monetize their content, their videos, their art, their streams, etc. And so Glass is this platform that lets creators kind of drop their videos as NFTs. We're starting to see decentralized social media applications become viable because the other elements of the stack enable it. So, I'm really excited kind of about the next year because I think the next, TikTok scale app probably will have crypto incentives embedded in them, and I think using, decentralized networks like Livepeer really align well for them.
Yeah, that's one of the really cool things I think about Livepeer is that it's simultaneously a great product for people looking to build dedicated stuff in Web3, as well as for people who are just looking to make, I don't want to call them Web2, but even for kind of non-crypto applications, the economics are such that it's almost a no-brainer to say this is a better kind of product to use. And so it's one of the few things that I've seen in Web3 that kind of create a very clear value proposition to everybody regardless of the sector that they're in. And so on that note, can you speak a little bit about, I think we may have discussed this earlier, but when we go look at playdj.tv, it's obviously not that DJ who's consuming Livepeer services. In fact, that person is totally kind of abstracted from the process. And so can we talk a little bit about who actually is using and consuming the Livepeer APIs, and then how do you kind of build a community around that? Because one of the things we're seeing with tons of Web3 communities and organizations like Glass and many others is that key to their success is actually cultivating a sense of community and ownership with the people who use their software. So if we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so who's the user of Livepeer? It's a developer or an entrepreneur, a product visionary, a hacker that's building a streaming app or service, right? And they're choosing Livepeer as their infrastructure, right? It's the same person who would make the decision, oh, I'm gonna build my app on AWS, or I'm gonna leverage Jamstack for my web application, right? So they're choosing Livepeer as their streaming infrastructure. And so in our community, serving that group of video developers is very important, right? We also, Livepeer is a marketplace, that's the demand side, but there's a supply side of these node operators, these video miners who are very active in running the network. They're super supportive in the Discord chat room in our community, helping one another with their setups. They share photos of their monitoring setups and their rigs, and they help debug hardware issues and driver issues and stuff like that. Really healthy, enthusiastic community who are all owners in the network as a result, so they're part of it. They stand to benefit from the project getting better, and a rising tide lifts all boats way. One of our challenges with the community is that our mission resonates really strongly with creators, like the streamers that actually stream on YouTube or Twitch, and are kind of disenchanted with the amount of money they can make as a result, or the control they have over their data, or the connection they have with their audience. And they think, oh, Livepeer is a decentralized Twitch or YouTube. Let me stream on that instead. But we don't have anything to point them towards. Like, we don't have the consumer application to let them go live. We don't want to be in the content moderation game or dealing with monetization for them or anything. So it's really our users that have to build the applications for them, and our users who have the vision for what a better streaming experience looks like for a creator than a Twitch. But not being able to harness all that enthusiasm means a lot of people enter our community and then kind of lose interest and fall off. One exciting thing we're doing is we're going to create a kind of a month-long Web3 video hackathon that pairs creators with developers, with designers, with product people, so they can all work together to create kind of the next iteration of streaming applications. And we think that's a good way to kind of introduce that creative element to the community as well.
Very cool. When is that hackathon?
August.
August, okay, looking forward to it. So I know you guys also do a bunch of other things to engage the community. Like, I know you guys have grants or sponsorships or even other hackathons. If it's valuable, maybe you can speak a little bit about how you guys are kind of actively looking to engage your community to build kind of these applications, and what are the mechanisms that you can then use both as an organization yourself, but then also granting tokens versus granting dollars and things of that nature.
Right. So the question is, how do we incentivize the community? How do we accelerate the community to build
what
these
are the
sorts
tools
of
in your
things?
toolbox to enable that?
There are different projects use entirely different mechanisms. Some projects have these big ecosystem funds where they reserved a ton of tokens in order just to give out to developers building on their network. Maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's not, right? It's kind of centralized control and allocation of a lot of the network. Some have VC ecosystem partnerships where venture investors are investing to support ecosystems. Livepeer took a more kind of decentralized view from the beginning. We have a company, but the company didn't reserve a huge portion of token for itself. This token was distributed kind of to the actors in the network from the early days. But because this protocol issues new tokens every day, that's a really powerful mechanism, trying to route those towards people who are building. And so there's a couple mechanisms. There's one node in our network that people stake towards, and every day it earns more tokens. And the whole purpose of that token pool is it's governed by a bunch of our community members who then receive grant applications for people that want to build things, and they review them and they approve grant proposals and then fund the development of those things. And so people building applications can apply to that community committee for a grant, right? Another thing you see is the protocol, people appeal to the protocol directly. They run a node and they say, hey, stake towards me. I'm going to keep a commission of tokens that you would otherwise get. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show progress building an application every single month. And leave your stake on me as long as you think this is going to help the ecosystem. And anyone in a decentralized way can kind of stake towards that node, not pay them anything, but let them just keep a portion of the future inflation. And that has funded the development of a number of core projects in the space. So we said, let the protocol itself incentivize these types of contribution. That said, sometimes centralized is faster and more efficient. Our company has venture funding. We have certainly, invested in, the development of certain components in the ecosystem. We have a marketing budget. We spend on marketing. We host hackathons. We show up to conferences. We have bounty prizes for developers who submit great hacks. So it's kind of this two-pronged approach of community versus fast-moving centralized operation. to help enable this.
Got it, very cool. So I'm going to be opening it up to questions from the audience in just a little bit. So to give you some time to think, I'll give you one more question, which is, what is what is in the pipeline for you guys in the next year? I know you mentioned a lot on the kind of product side, of hopefully people will be building new kind of social applications and Web3 applications, but from Livepeer itself, the core team, the company, what have you, what's kind of on your roadmap or what's coming up in the pipeline for you guys in the next year?
Yeah, one thing that we just did this past week is we open sourced this media server software that was kind of the transcoding ingest bit that I showed before called Mist Server. Our company did an acquisition of this company that builds this media server software and used to license it out to all of its users. And we said, oh, we're making this freely available and open source, and we think it's the world's best open source media server, just to dramatically accelerate the adoption of this software so that every video developer chooses it. And then if they want to scale their streaming, to scale the application that they build, they can just click a button and outsource all the transcoding to the Livepeer network. And we think our whole network benefits from kind of the increased usage that will drive. So in the next year, I think you'll see a lot of work on pushing the world's best video software paired with the world's most scalable, cost-effective, reliable video infrastructure. We think that's kind of an unstoppable combination compared to, hey, license this software and pay Amazon 8 times as much to run it. So that's a big focus. The other is, I mentioned the video transcoding kind of being the first core capability, but we have good progress on kind of the content delivery and adding to that, but also all of these GPUs doing transcoding can also do cool AI computation on video. So they can, as a video is being encoded, you can run AI algorithms to determine, is this likely to be adult content or violent content or copyrighted content, so that a developer building an application can kind of, in automated ways, aid in moderation, which is really important if you have a UGC application. And those AI tasks are just really expensive to perform if you're paying a separate service to do it. It's even more than the $3. It's like $6 to $9 an hour to use Google services to do that. So that should be like adding more capabilities like that to the network is going to be a big focus.
That sounds pretty cool. And so just so the AI thing, is that basically like while you're using the two transcoding and encoding chips on the GPU, you can also make use of the overall kind of pool of CUDAs to optimize for that, or?
Yeah, absolutely right. So like the video has already been decoded on this GPU, and these GPUs are the machines that run the models to do that kind of analysis on the video. So not only are you're kind of getting double bang for your buck. You're doing two intense compute jobs on one decode and encode, rather than sending it to separate services, paying double, and using cloud providers to do that. So again, really, really powerful. By the way, all this is a very heavy technical lift and like productization exercise to get it working, reliable, fast, productized so that it can plug into your workflows. So you're talking really excited about the promise. We've been working on this for years, and have great evidence of a lot of this making impact, but still a long journey ahead to like unlock all this potential.
That is very cool. So yeah, there's some alpha for you for everyone who came on. Yeah, so with that, we're going to open it up to questions. I think what I'll do is I'll pass the mic around, and then if you guys have a question, you can just pass it to the next person. But yeah, let's see what you guys are curious about.
As far as the current, I guess, persona of a miner for Livepeer, is there a particular percentage of people who are buying GPUs specifically for this? Is it people who are currently mining ETH? Is there a general persona around who's doing this now?
Yeah, really good question. There's, we say there's over 70,000 GPUs on the network. It's actually impossible for us to know how many there are exactly, but the reason we say that number is just because through a couple large miners who have tens of thousands of GPUs spread across data centers, we know that they are running on Livepeer, and while they're not all sitting there processing video at all times, that's more than enough capacity to handle all the live video of Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube combined. their capacity is enabled to be able to come online to Livepeer as demand warranted it, and they're running on the network. So you see that profile, right? But what you really see as active in our community is more of the kind of hobbyist or like small business type miner that has a few crypto mining rigs, a good bandwidth connection. That's more than enough capacity to do 100 plus streams concurrently, which if there was demand, you'd be making a lot of money doing that. But they're really engaged in trying to, kind of optimize their setups for Livepeer plus crypto mining at the same time. I think that buying dedicated hardware to put on Livepeer, if you were efficient and you were engaged, you could do well right now at the state of the network. You see some of them making a couple $1,000s a month, so that would pay off a few GPUs pretty quickly, right? But I think that if you look out long term, I don't see how buying dedicated hardware for only Livepeer could compete economically with someone who already has idle hardware that's profitable and paid off in a working model, and just trying to squeeze out some extra money for that idle video encoding capacity. But it's an open marketplace. We'll see how it plays out, and if those big miners have the incentive to be competing for what's available with video encoding.
Gotcha. And then for sort of those smaller miners that are potentially also mining something else, is there any concerns in terms of like the transition to ETH2, those miners not being able to provide to the network, if they're since GPU profitability would go down significantly with that?
Yeah, I mean, like this, Livepeer's played out over years, and it will continue to play out over years, and there's always different dynamics, right? So on one hand, you could say the decline of GPU mining because of the ETH merge is going to kind of decrease the number of kind of actively participating miners, which you could see as a negative. On the other hand, you could see there's tens of millions of these cards out there that are looking for revenue opportunities, and video transcoding is a high value task. So those GPUs are going to be doing something, whether they're used for gaming or AI models or rendering or whatever the owners or potential future owners could use them for. And so any of those tasks would be competing with kind of the video encoding via Livepeer's open network as an available revenue source, and maybe you'll see even more competition.
Got it, thanks.
Yeah. Also, I mentioned specialized hardware also plays a role. There's a lot of dedicated hardware for video encoding specifically, and some of that is being Livepeer enabled as well, will be like another source of capacity on the network. So I see this GPU dual mining thing as an amazing bootstrapping opportunity, but just as the fees rise, you'll see more competition. I think as the fees rise, you'll see more different types of specialized hardware come on.
Doug, I have another question. First of all, Doug, I just wanted to say that you have great capacity and you provide a tremendous amount of knowledge. I'm sure everybody here is quite capable of taking that in. My question is in regards, I'm myself, I am a YouTube creator, and I know when I upload my video, the most amount of time it takes for the YouTube algorithm to actually check for the copyright materials, for all that AI fancy stuff that you mentioned earlier. Do you think that people can actually step up and build apps that can really detect what content's being uploaded, via Livepeer, at a scale like this?
Is the question, can it be done quickly via Livepeer, or is it actually viable that you could rely on Livepeer to detect?
Yeah, mostly if it's reliable, because how difficult would it be to live up to Google's AI algorithms that are detecting, they can detect if you take a picture of a cat or a dog or a horse, and also with AWS and all their grand scheme. How difficult would it be to create an application that can also do it at the same or similar capacity?
Yeah, really good question, right? So these big tech giants have put out free services that we all get to use for years and years. As a result, they collect all of the data, and they have the best data sets to train their AI and machine learning models. to give them kind of this advantage that you can't just recreate because no one else has the data, right? I think this ties into Web3 more generally, beyond just Livepeer. And the notion is, do the incentives exist in these open systems and networks for kind of open data sets to be contributed to become together, where there can be shared AI models to tap into in order to provide kind of these solutions for the common good, right? I think you've seen projects like OpenAI, and there's various like data initiatives that try and pool data. What are the incentives for doing that? Benevolence, but Web3 actually gives you these crypto-economic primitives to put incentives and ownership over that. And so imagine a project that said, oh, our whole goal is to train a great AI model for nudity detection, so that these systems can automatically detect it. And yes, maybe you still need to raise a flag for a human moderator to check things out, but you can be so much more efficient, or you cannot need the 30,000 people that Facebook has just reviewing every single stream to see if it's appropriate, if you have kind of AI algorithms on it. And so could you have a protocol that incentivizes contribution of data from a number of open apps to this pool to train an AI model that can be used by developers using Livepeer and using Filecoin and using all these other networks? And can you create the right economic relationship so that value flows for the usage of these to those who contributed to it? I think it's a hard problem, but I think the coordination mechanisms of blockchain and the crypto economic incentives you can put in are two really powerful tools that would make it, really hard in the Web 2 world, but possible in the Web 3 world.
Thank you very much for a really in-depth answer.
Thank you, though. It's a very great speech. I just want to have a quick question about the business model of Livepeer. Do you make money between the revenue share with the node operator, or Livepeer is just a non-profitable company? Because I noticed that Livepeer is a .org website.
Yeah, really good question. Again, in 2016, in America, in New York, the thinking about what was the right kind of entrepreneurial mechanisms to build a Web3 project like this was in, there was one state of thinking. And now fast forward 5 years later, and all the acceleration of things like DAOs and communities and tooling and different legal mechanisms, there's a whole different type of thinking. But the route that we took is that, first and foremost, Livepeer is an open project governed by the protocol that's deployed on the blockchain. And the Livepeer token, which is ownership in the network, is distributed to all those who are participating in it. And yeah, there's livepeer.org, that is kind of the home of the open source software, the open project, the protocol, and our community, right? And then after a couple of years, when we said, well, Web3 apps aren't necessarily being built yet, they're not quite ready for this, and if this is going to be adopted in Web 2, you need kind of traditional business motion to bring on that adoption. You need product and sales and support and account management and those sorts of things. We said, oh, we're also independently going to form a company. Little just to go, the company always existed, but we're actually going to capitalize a company and we're going to operate as a company that focuses on driving adoption to the Livepeer network. And it's going to do it through for-profit products and services, and it's going to have equity shareholders that expect this company to have a good outcome, right? Now, the aligning mechanism between like, oh, do you care about the network success or do you care about the company's profitability? The aligning mechanism is actually the Livepeer token. The company holds a bunch of Livepeer token, and the investors in the company hold a bunch of Livepeer token. And the most pure and straightforward business model is, as this network grows and there's more fees flowing through, that would make this network valuable. By owning a part of this network, that would increase value. So the company should be aligned with all the token holders. Of course, there's the opportunity for potential conflict. Some of these products that we offer, like support contracts, are better as for-profit things. Companies want to pay for support. They want you to provide a high quality of service. You can invest in the people to do that, on kind of a for-profit basis. And so you could say there's a little misalignment, but I think just ideologically, it's important that we and all of our shareholders recognize, like, first and foremost, it's mission oriented to make Livepeer succeed, because that's the big opportunity that we all see. So there's all sorts of other ways of doing it. You see some projects have foundations, some projects are just companies, some projects are just DAOs, they're just loose collectives of people that organize with no official entity whatsoever. There's a lot of benefits and drawbacks to all those different approaches. Everyone is still learning, but we've tried to prioritize, like, practicality and speed of execution with kind of the true ethos of decentralized ownership of the network itself.
Thank you for your questions, guys. So before we wrap it up, I have a couple of fast ones. So first, other than Livepeer, what's your favorite Web3 project or organization or DAO that you like to look at or that you like to be a part of?
Yeah, there's a couple I really bias towards this infrastructure side, projects that are servicing developers. So we have this website called web3index.org that shows the different infrastructure projects, like storage networks and bandwidth networks, and a couple on there that I think are just awesome are Arweave, which is a storage network, and it stores things permanently. So, like, they've archived millions of documents on pieces of data coming out of Ukraine in the last couple of days. There's a project called The Graph, which is a kind of data services and indexing project that makes it really easy to build performant applications using blockchain data. We don't have to query the blockchain for every single request. It's really awesome. There's a project called Akash, which is kind of a decentralized AWS. It lets you spin up and rent a server to serve your application. Skynet. I think anyone building to help enable developers to build the world of Web3, I think, is super exciting.
Very cool. What was the name of that website you said that indexes all of these?
Yeah, web3index.org. It actually shows kind of shows them by how much people are paying to use the actual underlying service. So it's not just ranking things by market cap or speculative token price. It's saying how many fees did people pay to use these networks, and we see these networks growing and people actually beginning to adopt.
Very cool. And I'm surprised there's one called Skynet. I would imagine that's like oh hey, whatever they like. But that's interesting. And my closing question for the night is, how did you come to the name Livepeer?
You're asking the hardest question in computer science. How do you name things, right? It's a combination of finding something that has connotations and associations with what you're doing, so live streaming and peer-to-peer, something that is not trademarked and is available, and the domain name is available for what you're trying to do, right? But when we look back at the other candidate names that we didn't go with, and I'm very glad we didn't go with these names because they were just terrible and made no sense. So you take the first domain name you can find and you start building.
That's a good enough reason these days, yeah. Well, with that, thank you, Doug, so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. This was very informative and insightful, and yeah, thank you.
Sure thing, yeah.